So thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to the LimeLight Profit and Loss Analytics webinar. This is part 2 in our 4-part series on analytics. My name is Matthew Abdullah. I'm one of the marketing managers here at LimeLight CRM, and I will be moderating today's webinar. I'm joined by 2 guests. Our first guest is Greg Austin. Greg is a product manager here at LimeLight. He's been with the company for just over a year. Greg graduated from the University of Southern Maine in Portland with a degree in statistics, and he's been working on these new analytics reports since their inception. Our second guest is our Director of Analytics, Chad Buckendahl. Chad launched his first lead generation program online for New York Life in 1996, so he has been in this space for over 20 years. He then went to Whole Foods Market in 1998, where he launched their first 2 nutritional supplement brands online. From there, he went to Orange Geo International, the makers of Orange Glow, and then he moved on to Video Professor. Between 2006 and 2014, he ran several diet, skin, and education offers. Chad also co-founded Two Chad's Fulfillment and recently sold that business. And today, Chad functions as our full-time analytics director, focused solely on analytics and product features within LimeLight CRM. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Chad.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I appreciate it. And Greg, thanks. I know you're on too, and you'll be participating as well.
Yep.
And thank you all the participants for just taking the time again today to go through some of this material. As you know, this is the second webinar in our series, and 2 weeks ago we talked about the affiliate quality dashboards within analytics and the key identifiers to lead to understanding the quality of your affiliates. Today we're talking about a topic that's not quite as sexy as that last topic we talked about, but I believe it's just as every bit as critical. I know it, talking about profit and loss can be a little bit dry, so I'll try to jazz it up a bit. But it is numbers, and so we'll try to get through the material, and I hope that you'll find it very beneficial to you. So based on all the questions that I got last time about the affiliate webinar, I hope that we have that same kind of responsiveness as we get through this webinar. I think we had about 30 questions during the webinar. We had about 100 people on that last webinar, so it was well received, and we've got that posted. I'm sure you've seen that link out there that I sent to you, but feel free to forward that to your friends or whoever you think would benefit from watching that webinar. Let's start off again by just covering a few administrative items, just so we can set expectations here. So first off, the slides, again, what I'll do is if you Skype me after the webinar, just let me know that you want the slides, and I will get them sent over to you. We had over 100 people request the slides last webinar, so that's great. And my Skype, again, will be on that last slide, so don't worry about that if you don't have it. So the next 30 minutes, I think, well, let's do this. I think we've got about 30 minutes of material, but just like we did last time, if you've got questions, just post them within the GoToWebinar there. And Matt, I don't know if you have any other instructions on what they can do there with posting questions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question panel within the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can enter any questions there, and throughout the webinar we'll be sure to take a moment and answer them. Also, if you have any specific questions, you can send an email to myself, Greg, or Chad, as well as send a direct message through GoToWebinar with any questions you may have. And so, any of those 3 mediums would be a great way to ask us questions during and after the webinar.
Great. And Matt, why don't we go ahead and post that second poll question now so we can get the responses tabulated on that.
Absolutely. Here's our second poll question, and that is, have you entered expenses into the platform yet?
Okay, Matt, let's I know that none of what we're we're going to talk about today is going to matter unless we first agree that P&L reporting is critical. So we're going to talk about the importance of P&L reporting here. So there's three high-level reasons why the P&L is important to you or should be important to you. Number one, it identifies expenses that need to be reduced. So by looking at the P&L, you can identify anomalies in your data, and you'll see that when we jump into the actual P&L within analytics here in a moment. The second reason is that you can isolate months where net profit was better or worse, and when you see that, you can dig in to determine why, and over time you'll be able to slowly just chip away at those things that are hurting your profit. And the third reason is just understanding net profit in general. What are the key items that reduce profit? You'll start to understand that. So net profit, as you know, is your bottom line. At the end of the day, that's what's going to go into your bank account, and that's why you're on this this webinar. I'm thinking is because you like profit. There's nothing to be ashamed about liking profit. I mean, that's what this is all about. So net profit, it's gross revenue minus refunds, chargebacks, cost of goods, expense assumptions, merchant processing expenses, and taxes. So really, it's your bottom line number, like I said, and it's subtracted all your expenses. So the benefits of having a profit and loss within analytics is, and I'm sure you can think of many more, but three of them here are that it's available 24/7. Whenever you want to get to this report, you can get to it. You don't need to wait for your accountant or whoever puts together your financials to run in and look at how you're doing. The second reason is just you can filter to isolate campaigns, affiliates. You can filter by country and all the different filters that we have. So you can't obviously do that with a standard P&L, but with that P&L within analytics will allow you to do that. Mm-hmm. And lastly, there's very little work to maintain the P&L, and we're gonna go through how to enter expenses and what I recommend for just how often to tabulate these expenses. But know that it's not a ton of work for you to actually get this data in front of you regularly.
Correct. And I want to stress the importance of entering those expenses into your system. A P&L report's only as good as the data that's going into it. Without those expenses, you're pretty much just looking at a revenue report. So there is a high importance on making sure you get those expense assumptions into the system.
That's a good point, Greg. You know, I when I went through and entered the expenses into our sales demo that we'll look at here in a minute, I think it took me about 15 minutes to get through every expense, and I created 3 different profiles, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But it really doesn't take a long time as long as you've got the expenses that you want to enter, like in a spreadsheet, or maybe accounting can give those to you, or if you just know off the top of your head. I mean, it really doesn't take long to get these entered in. So before we jump into the actual report, though, I want to talk about a couple of different ways that we look at expenses within analytics. So what you'll see here is that you can enter per shipment expenses, or you can enter them as percentages. So what I mean by that is the per shipment's pretty straightforward, and that's the one that I recommend. It's more accurate, but you have to do some legwork to be able to figure out, how much you want to put in as an assumption for each one of these assumptions. So it's a little more work, but if you do percentages, you can certainly do that. We have the functionality there. You're just basically saying, for example, I want my CPA to be 10% of sales, or maybe that's a bad example, but if you want to do your general and administrative expenses as 5% of your gross revenue, you can certainly do all that within the functionality within analytics. So in looking at the survey responses, I see that 28% have actually entered in the expenses within analytics, so that's great, but 61% have not started entering the expenses, and then 11% have entered some of the expenses. So Matt, let's push a poll question
Take one
out.
moment, Chad.
Yeah.
I just pushed out the poll question for you.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the next slide there. So what you see here is it's a spreadsheet that I put together to help me enter the expenses into the sales demo site that we'll show you here in a minute. So as you can see, I've got my system expenses, my packaging, CPA, customer service, fulfillment, operating, and postage expenses all lined out here in the spreadsheet. And this is really what this is a great example of something that you want to put together to enter your expenses. And again, like I said earlier, what I would do is I would, you can see here I've got these 3 months worth of expenses for each one of these categories, and I would continue to update that. So you just create a spreadsheet, for April, you would, average January, February, and March, and then maybe in 3 months, you go ahead and take the previous 3 months and do your averages again. It really doesn't take a ton of time. You can see here that I've got my per shipment average here. Like if you look at the packaging expense, you can see that my per shipment average for packaging, it averages out to 28 cents, but my percentage average, that averages out to about 0.8. So either way that you do it, it's going to work within analytics. So let's see.
And Chad, if you don't mind, I interrupt. We're certainly open to any suggestions on making this easier for you to enter expense assumptions. So if there's any suggestions, from you guys as far as, an importing feature, extra training we can do on entering these expense assumptions, anything at all, we're open to the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just cover the expenses here for a minute. I've gotten quite a few questions about this. So system expenses, those are expenses associated with the actual system providers, such as LimeLight, the CRM, any chargeback providers, email service providers, sales tax providers, those types of things would go into what we call system expenses. Packaging expenses are those that are associated to the actual packaging costs. This is not fulfillment, but it's actually the packaging that goes into the shipments that you're shipping out. And then we've got CPA. We all know what that is. Customer service. Those are the expenses, whether you're outsourcing it or insourcing it. You should be able to isolate how much it costs you per order in a given month to have a customer service team. And then fulfillment. This is just the expenses for shipping out products. So pick, pack, ship. It doesn't have anything to do with the packaging or the postage. And then operating, what that is it's a catch-all type of bucket that you can put in things like your the rent for your building, the lights, you know, utilities, salaries, that type of thing. It's a really important category of expense here, because without that, I mean, it's going to be one of your larger expenses next to CPA. It's something that you really want to think through. And then finally, you got postage expenses here. And you can see here in each one of these, what I did was I just grabbed the invoices, fictitious invoices for 3 months. I took my shipped orders from the sales demo site, and then I took my gross revenue from the sales demo site to be able to calculate what my per shipment average is and my percent average was.
And Chad, we got a couple questions here regarding these expense assumptions.
Yeah.
One of the first questions, which I can answer pretty simply, is where we enter expenses. So the expense assumptions will be entered under the Manage Campaign section of the CRM. And what you will do is create an expense profile, and then you'll associate each one of these individual expenses that Chad just described to that profile. So you can put multiple CPA, fulfillment, operating, all into one expense profile, which you will then assign to the campaign.
And we'll jump into that too here in just a minute, and I'll actually set up several profiles so that you can see just how we're doing this. I promise you'll walk away understanding exactly how to do that.
And another question, Chad, we got here is, if a client would like to enter their own expense as a new category, do we have a way of doing that, or is there a way that we'll be able to do that in the future?
We don't have a way, and what I would say about that is that expense should probably fall under operating. It would be interesting to understand. They didn't say, Greg, what the expense was it? Did they?
It looks like a telephone call center, for example, was the one they used.
Right. So where I would put that is in customer service.
Yep.
Any other questions?
It looks like we're good for now to move on.
Okay. Okay. So now, if we enter expenses here, so I'm just going to take control and show you how to actually enter these expenses in here. So you should see my Safari window here, and we're looking at the P&L. So I'm going to go into campaigns, and I'm going to go to expense assumptions. And what you'll see here is 3 profiles that I've created. And I'm just going to go ahead and drill into one of these profiles. So actually, let me back up. So why would you have 3 profiles? Well, you'll probably have even more than that, and it's up to you. But what I assumed here is that I was going to have all my expenses assumptions were going to be the same except CPA. I have 3 different tiers in my fictitious campaigns on CPA. I think the first tier is something like $22, and the second's $23, and the third is like $25. So if I just jump into one of these, again, I'm just clicking that plus button there to jump into it. You can see all my expense assumptions that I've got lined out here. So postage at 303, that's going to skip the rebill. And so I can go in here and I can actually edit this. So I can show you, here's all your expense assumptions. So this one's for postage. And obviously I'm going to skip the rebill because we're not shipping anything out on the rebill on my fictitious campaign. But the functionalities here to just create these expense assumptions however your campaigns are set up, however your offers set up. And then if you wanted, like I was saying earlier, you can choose to do a percentage. So you could enter in a percentage rather than a flat rate, but I prefer just entering in that flat rate. So let me just let me create a new profile for you so that you know exactly how to do this. Okay, so we're back at this menu. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the actions menu, I'm going to click add, and now I'm going to enter a new profile. So I'll call this profile 4. Now I've got that profile 4 there that I see, and I've got 0 items in it. So what that means is there's no expense assumptions assigned to it. So now what I want to do is I want to, again, click on my add expense assumptions, that plus button, and I'm going to then click the actions button and click add. And now I'm going to enter in system expense. Let's just say it's 43 cents per order on a flat rate. And I'm going to put that on all affected depths. So it's going to go to, that expense is going to be attributed to initials, rebills, and recurring orders. Just click save, and now you've got your first expense assumption there. If I want to enter another one, and I'll just enter a couple here. So let's do my favorite topic of fulfillment. See, so I want to skip the rebill, and then $1.25 flat, and there we have fulfillment in there. So now if I just go back here, I'm going to go back into one of these profiles.
And just to clarify, the reason he is skipping the rebill will be to not capture that charge but no ship part of the order. So you have a 14-day trial where you're shipping product on day 1. 14 days later, you're charging no ship, and then you're back on the normal fulfillment cycle. So that's the reason he skipped the rebill there.
Right. So a couple of common questions that I get about these expense assumptions. The first one is why separate out packaging from fulfillment? Why separate postage? And so you've got postage, you've got fulfillment, and you've got packaging that all really tie to the actual shipment of products. So why would we need to separate each one of them? Because what you're going to want to see is you're going to want to see how each of these affect your profitability. And by doing that exercise like what we showed in that spreadsheet earlier, you're going to identify right away if something's changing on you so that you can address it. Whether it's good or bad, you can address it. And the second question that I get pretty commonly is how often will the expenses be updated? So let's say that you go in here at 7 o'clock in the morning and you update expenses. The way that we have these expenses running right now is the process runs every morning at about 2 a.m. Eastern time. So if you've entered expenses in during the day, it's going to get picked up that next morning, and you'll see it actually apply to each one of your profiles. So what we've actually done is we've created a mechanism which will update it more frequently, but we're not completely comfortable with it yet. So we have plans on updating these more frequently, and you'll see that probably some kind of notification soon. We actually have had it running the last couple of weeks, and it's been working pretty good. Let me jump back in here, and I just want to go to, I want to show you how to actually assign these to campaigns. So now you've got your profiles set up, and what you'd want to do then is you'd want to click the this plug-in here that says assign to campaigns, and you want to click on the campaign that you want it assigned to, and then you're going to just click save, and now that has successfully added that campaign to that particular profile. So let me just do that again so that you have it down. So I'm going to go to my expense assumption. I'm actually going to go to the third profile this time. I'm going to assign this to a campaign. I'll put it to 67 there. Click Save, and it's going to tell me you successfully updated your campaign configuration, and then we're good to go. So that's all you have to do to actually set up a profile, enter your expense assumptions, and assign them to campaigns.
Okay, Chad, we got a couple of great questions in here. The first one is, if you update expense assumptions, does it retroactively apply to historical data?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it does. So if just to clarify here, so let's say that you enter expense assumptions in today, and you've been with LimeLight for 2 years. Those expense assumptions are going to go retro all the way back to 2 years. Let's say that you enter your expense assumptions in today, and then in 3 months you update those expense assumptions. What that will do is it will retro it all the way back to the beginning of the time, so that your expense assumptions are always relevant to the time that you're in at that moment. We are working on building out the functionality to be able to allow you to create multiple expense assumption profiles that are applied through time. It sounds a bit complicated, but some feedback that we've received is, hey, I want my expense assumptions that I created 6 months ago to actually stick, so that they actually are applied until I change them. And then moving forward, the expense assumptions will be applied. And so we are going to be working on that, but it's not the highest priority right now, because the functionality, actually, we've gotten pretty good feedback on it.
And I think the reason we did it this way, to add to that, was because this is a new feature we're adding into our system. So we wanted you to be able to reflect that historical data as well. Once people start using the expense assumptions more, we may take the approach of doing it as more of a snapshot in time. But let's move on. So one of the questions that it looks like was answered by the client was if there's expenses for the product itself.
Oh, right. So let's go there. Let's look at, so you'll go to offers, and you'll go to products. And so let's just go into one of these items here, click edit, and under cost of goods sold, you'll just enter your cost right in there. And then the other item, while I'm on it, what you'll want to do is you'll want to go to your payment systems and then go to gateway providers. And I'm going to go into one of these just by clicking edit. And you can see that window, can't you?
Correct.
Okay. So what you'll want to do is you'll just want to update each one of these. So you want to update your global monthly cap, your transaction fee, chargeback fee, your processing percent, and then obviously your reserve percent. Once you do that, click save. These numbers will be pulled into analytics and are presented on several reports, but the P&L uses all of these except, let's see, so we've got, except for the monthly cap. The monthly cap is used elsewhere on some other reports, but yeah, these are those. That's a great question. Those are important expenses, Stan.
And Chad, is there any way of entering an expense as a monthly expense instead of by a per order basis? Like, for instance, a rent or utility cost might be more of a monthly cost rather than a per order.
Right. Yeah. So there is not a way to do that, and the way that we've configured the system, if you think back to that spreadsheet, is that we're just assuming an assumption that your operational costs, like rent, would be factored in using a per order value, because that will fluctuate as your orders increase and decrease. It will fluctuate, and that's why I'm saying best practices here is to every 3 months just update that based on your volume.
And does COGS apply to the first rebill?
Does COGS apply to the first rebill? No, it does not, because there's no product being shipped.
Perfect. Okay. I think we're good for now to move on.
Okay. So Matt, if you want to take it back, we'll hit this next slide. Okay, so this slide is just a reminder for me to talk through or just alert you to all the reports that we have in analytics. Obviously, you see all these, and we're covering profit and loss today, but we've got a pretty good suite of reports already there as a basis, and then coming soon, we have, and since the last webinar, we've actually firmed up a couple of new reports, and we've firmed up the priority of these reports. So what you see here is they're kind of in priority of how we are currently anticipating these rolling out, with exception to decline salvage and fulfillment.
Hey Chad, I want to interrupt you for just a moment and launch another poll question, and it has to do with the expenses. Will people be entering their expenses for the next 30 days to take advantage of this report now that they've learned more about it?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see. I mean, we show that what was it, 30. Oh no, I see. Well, there was a large percentage of people that hadn't entered their expenses in yet, and I'm really interested to see if after this webinar there's an uptake of the percentage of people that actually enter in the expenses. I would just, obviously, I would encourage you to do that, because this report is it's actually one of the highest viewed reports in the analytics suite. A lot of people that are using it, the feedback has been just great. It's just really one of those reports that you can't live without.
And if you're not currently using it, we'd like to know why. Is there a difficulty with having to build all these expense profiles where we can make a process that would be slightly easier? Is there missing metrics that you'd like to see on the profit and loss report? We're perfectly open to hearing feedback.
I will say we're getting a lot of yeses, so whatever you're doing, Chad, awesome. It's working.
Awesome. Okay, so hey Greg, can you speak to the decline salvage and fulfillment real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of the new reports we're working on, one of which is decline salvage. So we have a brand new decline salvage coming out that will give you the ability for full customization to the day of the month that you want to rebill. And we are actually expanding from 5 attempts to 10 attempts. And each of those attempts can have its own timeline around that. So with that will come a report. And this decline salvage report will show you a success rate by decline salvage attempt. So what this will be helpful is if you have a decline salvage of up to 5 attempts, but you're looking at data and you're seeing that you don't get any attempts after 3, or you don't get any success after 3 attempts. You might want to start limiting your decline salvage to only do 3 attempts, and what that does is it cuts processing fees, any sort of other gateway fees. So the transparency into decline salvage is what will be there with that report. As for fulfillment and inventory, we are currently working on a couple of enhancements for some of our fulfillment providers to basically do warehouse management and inventory tracking. Currently in our system, the way inventory is entered is very manual. You have to basically track the inventory coming in, which then works a subtraction with orders being processed. But what this will do is we'll allow a postback from the fulfillment center, and we will in turn handle all inventory within our system. So, I mean, the use case of this is wide open for how far you could go with inventory management.
Great. So let's jump to the next slide here. And this is just showing you where to go in the menu. And Matt, if you could just toss it over to me real quick, I'll actually show you the dashboard. And we'll run through it. All right. So again, the way that you get to the profit and loss is you go to the analytics menu under operational, click profit and loss, and that's going to display the P&L report for you. Let's go through the profitability table here. And Greg, jump in if you have any comments on this profitability table. But this is your most important table in the report. So gross revenue, pretty straightforward. I have gotten some questions about if there's anything subtracted from gross revenue, like refunds or chargebacks, anything like that. And the answer is no. Gross revenue is that pure number that you actually sold when the amount of money that you generated by selling all the products. And then your net revenue takes into consideration the just simple deductions to the gross revenue. Specifically, any refunds or chargebacks would be subtracted out of net revenue. So gross revenue is your pure high number, and then net revenue has a couple of different expenses taken out of it. Then you've got this total expenses column, and what that shows you is the sum of your expense assumptions, your COGS expenses, and then your merchant processing expenses. And we went over each one of those. So we're pulling the data from each of those three sources right here to give you your total. And then we've got net profit. So what you'll see here, and I've got this broken down by subscription cycle. So you're always going to see your net profit in that initial billing be negative, but then the hope is that you're going to regain profitability at that first rebill, or at the rebill, like in my example here. Okay, so then you've got, let's see, net profit though, that's your bottom line numbers. What it is that it's gross revenue minus refunds, chargeback, COGS, and any expense assumptions, any merchant processing expenses, and taxes. And then you've got COGS, which again, like we showed you, that pulls from that product setup. And then gross profit. Gross profit's the revenue generated minus the cost of products sold before the deduction of any other expense assumptions. So that's another higher level number. And then you've got reserves, which is basically it's your estimated reserve amount that is being withheld, and that pulls from that merchant processing profile. So if you've got 10% in there, it's going to take 10% and throw it into this reserve number. If you've got 5, it's going to use the 5%. It's only as accurate as the number that you put in there, obviously. And then finally, we've got profit per customer, which is a great metric here. And what that is the average amount of profit generated from each individual customer that you have. The formula there is net profit divided by the unique initial customers. So good number to have. And you know, I got a request earlier today to actually put the profit per customer on the affiliate report. So we'll probably put it on one or both of those reports so that you have it there. It's a great metric. So as we look at the P&L, you know, what I'd point out is it's got all the same functionality as what you saw in the affiliate reports. You can go and you can click on your help to get just different cues on what's going on with each of these graphs and tables. You can see here we've got the two charts up top, and then we've got profitability. If you go down a little bit lower here, you're going to see refunded by cycle, and then you'll see your order information, your expense information, and your merchant processing expenses. So you've got all your data right there. And I'll point out the filter. What you'll want to do here, like if you wanted to put this in a range, you could select is in a range, and you could say, let's say I want to look at April. Well, let's look at March. Well, I look at all of March. To look at all of March, I want to start with 3/1 and see how it says until before here. What you'll want to do is you'll want to go to April 1st. So that's going to get everything before April 1st. Hit run and minimize your filter, and you're actually going to see that data populate. As you see, what's happening here is this has already come back with the data that we wanted, and then you saw that was grayed out. It just takes a few seconds to respond or actually just feed all that data into the report, but it's pretty quick. We've actually been working pretty aggressively at speeding up reports so that we can meet your expectations for how quick the report should load. Okay, so that's what I have for the material. I see that there's quite a few questions here. I guess, Matt, do you want to organize how we answer each of these? Because one thing that I want to make sure that we do here, the material for the webinar is now complete, but I want to make sure that we stay online here and answer every single question that we get.
So it looks like one of the questions here is, if I made adjustments on expense items, will that adjust the profitability chart in real time? The answer to that is no, it will not. The expense basically will be updated once a day. So for newly entered expenses, you'll have to wait. I think it runs at 12 a.m., I believe. But you'll have to wait for the full cycle of the day to take that expense assumption into consideration.
Right.
So, gentlemen, I want to launch one last poll before people start leaving the webinar, and it's an important poll for us so we can understand, what reports people are most looking forward to seeing next, because this helps us actually, figure out what we need to put on our roadmap. So before we start answering too many questions and people start leaving, we want to get this last poll question out there. But Greg, go ahead and continue answering questions while we get the answers for this.
And some of these we were able to get to.
Cool, this is great. Yeah, overwhelmingly we're hearing subscription forecasting. So we'll take that data into consideration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that feedback's great. We wouldn't know otherwise. I would have guessed that alerts would be, or even cash flow would be more important, but it looks like that subscription forecasting is something that I need to take a harder look at.
Maybe it looks like pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, it's up to 50%.
Excellent. Right now would also be a great time to let everyone know that we are coming out with a update to our decline salvage functionality, and we're going to be producing a webinar on Monday. We'll be sending out an email in the next day or two with the time for that and another registration webinar link, but be sure to be looking out for that because that's going to be a great webinar. We want to get people up and running on the new features and functionality before we release it, so when it comes out on Wednesday, you are ready to use it and ready to go. So just a heads up to everyone who's still here.
So we've got a question here that I don't think we answered. The question is, and Greg, if you want to take this, what is the formula for net profit?
Okay. I think we went over this.
So I can take it real quick. We did. I just want to make sure we answer every question that we get.
Okay.
So gross net profit is gross revenue minus total expenses and
Taxes as
minus your
well.
taxes. Yeah, so good question.
Yep, that is a good one.
And then, yeah, so there's a question that I addressed, but I'll hit it again. But is there a plan to update expenses more often? And the answer is yes. We've worked on that, and we feel pretty good about it. That will launch very soon.
Last couple questions here. When will this be available via API?
Yeah. So
Good question.
it is a good question. I hate always saying soon, but yeah, and I don't know. That's actually something that the team has to prioritize amongst all the other priorities that we have. But that is certainly one of those things that is higher on priority, and something that has actually been on the list for a bit of time.
All right, excellent. That is most of the questions that we've gotten for today. We can leave
Right.
an extra minute just for one or two more questions to come in. Otherwise, feel free to email any one of us. Our email addresses are here on the screen. You can hit up Chad. Chad will also provide the slides to the webinar via Skype, and that's going to be the fastest, easiest way to get in touch with him. You can also message Greg. You can send me an email. I'm not going to be as much help, but you can still send me an email if you want to, have a conversation or talk about anything.
Hey, Matt, I just got a Skype message from one of the viewers, and he's asking how do you enter a question in to the system? So if you could just run through that. I know quite a few people have left now, but I want to make sure that we're answering everybody's questions.
Sure. In the side panel, the GoToWebinar control panel, you should be able to see a tab that says questions, where you should be able to type in a question that we'll be able to see and answer for you in real time. But also, since he's got you on Skype, Chad, I think he could just ask you the question through there.
That's true. That's true. So you know who you are. Just ask me through Skype.
All right, I think we should wrap this up for the day. We don't want to keep people waiting around for too much longer, but we will have a replay of this webinar recording available as soon as later today and tomorrow. If anybody has any specific questions, again, feel free to send an email or Skype message to Chad, an email to Greg, an email to myself. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to go through all this with us. And, I definitely learned a lot about the analytics, and I'm looking forward to the next webinar as well.
Great, thanks, Matt. Yeah,
Thanks,
I
Matt.
think this next webinar on the 3rd is going to be a pretty good one too on customer attrition. So I look forward to that. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And like Chad mentioned, on the 3rd, we will have our 3rd part in this 4-part series about customer attrition. Are you heading for disaster or fields of gold? Thanks again for joining us. Look forward to seeing you in just a couple weeks.